Well, good morning. Good to see you guys today. If you don't know me yet, my name's Chris. I'm one of the pastors here. It's so good to have you today. Hey, I want you to think back to when you were a kid, and I want you to recall if you ever heard this before, or if you may have said this to someone else. Ready for it? Oh, yeah? Well, my dad's stronger than your dad. Anybody remember that, or how many you used that? And then another person, no, my dad's strong. Oh yeah, well my dad can beat up your dad. And it just keeps going back and forth, and before you know it, the mama jokes got in there, and then it's kind of like an all-out war at that point. Or maybe like as a kid, you said something like this, or you've heard a kid say this before, like, I have more Barbies than you do, right? Or I have more trucks than you do, right? What's going on? The comparison game. The comparison game. Now, it may look more sophisticated as we grow up, but whether it's appearance, smarts, success, finances, we still play the game. We still play it today. And when we make unhealthy comparisons, it can cause us to feel like we have to strive for more, that like we are less than, that we're behind. We feel like we're not winning, right? Think about it for a moment. Think of all the ads that remind us that we could be more attractive if we just have this new product. $49.95. You, sir, you, ma'am, are going to be more attractive, right? Or think about all the media or social media that remind us that make us feel less attractive. And if that wasn't enough, think of all the social interactions where we compare ourselves to others. It's like, oh my gosh, look at that person. Like, I have this dad bod going on right now. They have like washboard abs. How did that happen? They're like thinner. Or man, there's this other person. They're just so much muscular than me. I don't even have muscles anymore. Where did they go? Or another person, man, that person's more beautiful or more handsome. We compare and we compare. Or think of all the ads that we see that remind us that we could be wealthier. If you would just do A plus B plus C, and if that doesn't work out, plus D, and if that doesn't work out, plus Z, you would just be wealthier. Or think of all the things we see in media or social media that make us feel behind. And if that wasn't enough, think of all the social interactions we have with people where we're comparing ourselves to others. You're like, they already had the house. How do they have the boat too? Like, I don't know. How did they go from getting the house and now having a house and a boat? I don't get it. We're like, man, this person always gets every 6 months they have like a new surfboard. Man, and this surfboard, it like finds all the waves for them. It's like sonar connected. That's the only reason they're good on a board. It's even surfing for them. They don't have to do anything. I'm better than them. Or man, that career that they have, it just seems like they're so much farther along than I am. Or the wealth that you could just keep going and going and going. Comparison can be such a trap. Now, I want to say this up front. There's nothing inherently wrong with comparing. It can be healthy to a degree so that we can have benchmarks or goals to strive after. If you have someone in your life that you want to emulate, that you have positive traits, that can be healthy too. That said, comparison can be a dangerous, because when it's unhealthy, listen to this, when it's unhealthy, it can feed some of our deepest insecurities. And here's what I'm here to proclaim today. God wants to free you from your insecurities. And that's why I'm excited today to share a piece of the real life story of a guy in the Bible named Saul. And because it will reveal how his insecurities and comparison got the best of him. Because like I already said, God wants to free you from your insecurities. It won't happen overnight, but step by step, he wants to free you from them. And I have this hunch, could just be a hunch, but I have this hunch you want to be free from your insecurities as well. I think we all do. Because insecurities can rob us so much. So let's go to Saul. He was a king, and he had a personal assistant named David. And as you're about to see, he was very successful for Saul. Let's look what it says in 1 Samuel 18. It says, whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. So far, so good. David was loyal. He was so loyal. In fact, he was so loyal that he took one for the team, and he took on a giant named Goliath. Ever heard that story before? That's where the sports terminology comes from. When you have an underdog, it's David versus Goliath, right? That's where this comes from. And he takes one for the team. Everybody's afraid to go after Goliath. David does it and he defeats. But even though David was successful and loyal, something happened that would end up triggering Saul's insecurities, and it ended up trapping him. As they were returning home from battle, the battle where David defeated Goliath, there was some women that came to Saul to celebrate. They met up with Saul to celebrate. Let's look at what happened. This is when the triggering of his insecurities came into play. 1 Samuel 18 says, as they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands. Yay. But David, his tens of thousands. You can probably already see where this is headed, but just for curiosity's sake, let's continue to look at the story. It says this, Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. Man, they have credited David with his tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. And listen to this irrational fear that came because of Saul's insecurities. What more can he get but the kingdom? All they did is credit David with tens of thousands. And Saul thought all he had left was, is he going to get my kingdom? And then look what happened next. And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. Do you see how big of a trap our insecurities can be? Do you see how big of a trap, when it's unhealthy, comparison can be? Because here's what's interesting. Saul could have been celebrating as they experienced a huge victory. He could have been thankful to God. He could have been thankful to David. Thank you for doing that. But instead, this is so important, you might even want to write it down. Comparison prevented celebration. Think about that. Comparison prevented celebration. And when comparison eats at our insecurities, it can do the same to us. I'll give you an example from my life. I remember a time where a family member was so close to this family member. They called me up on the phone so excited to say that something went through finally for them and it was really good for them. And admittedly, I wasn't in the best time at that time. I was struggling. And I'm not saying I had no celebration at all, but you want to know I didn't say this to them, of course, but you want to know one of my initial reactions? It was, well, why hasn't this happened to me yet? Ever been there? Why am I sitting here struggling and they got it? And thankfully, and I'm not saying I didn't do any celebration, but thankfully, God very lovingly, very gently, just a moment or two later was like, your family member has been through so much. They finally had a break. And you can't celebrate with them? What happened? Comparison prevented celebration. Whether it's celebrating for someone else or celebrating for ourselves. In fact, President Theodore Roosevelt says this: comparison is the thief of joy. He says that comparison is the thief of joy. So I want to ask you, what celebrations do you miss out on because of comparison and insecurity? And I don't ask that to make you feel guilty. I just want to challenge you, to encourage you, to gently cause you to be aware, like, what celebrations am I missing out on simply because I'm comparing and it's eating at my insecurity? Let me give you a couple examples. Have you ever landed a job or got a raise, but you missed out on celebration because you realize you're still making lower than your friend? Yeah, that can be an example. That's a real one, right? Here's another example. Ever missed out on being thankful for your spouse, friend, or family member because you were wishing they were like someone else? One laugh in the room. Yes. One of you know. Oh, it's my what? What? It's my wife, people. Wow. Just, if you want to walk out of the room, please. It will be a lot. No, I'm just teasing. Just teasing. Think about it for a moment. What celebrations do you miss out on? Do you see why it's so important that we get freedom from insecurity? Not only did Saul, he was prevented from celebrating. This happens later on in the chapter. I'm just going to describe it for a moment. Because of Saul's insecurities, it didn't just stop with preventing him to celebrate. Saul would go on to fear David. And then it eventually says that David would become his enemy for the rest of his life. And it all started because of Saul's insecurities. See, it shows us that insecurity can even affect our relationships. Again, just some examples. Maybe it causes you to be afraid of others who seemingly have more than you, or that you feel are doing better than you are. Or maybe it doesn't cause fear, but it causes you to treat people differently. Here's an example. Maybe it causes you to mistrust people. How did they come up with that? How are they able to do that? That's what happened to Saul. He had no reason whatsoever. This was all in Saul's head. He had no reason to mistrust David. David was so loyal. Even after Saul started treating David differently, David still treated him with kindness. He still ministered to Saul, and Saul just continued to mistrust him. It was all in Saul's head. Or maybe you're less compassionate towards others who seemingly have it better. Why are they discouraged? Have you seen their bank account lately? It's like, if you get to this level, sorry, your feelings don't mean anything anymore. Oh, you have this much net worth? Okay, it doesn't matter how you feel, right? So can we have less compassion for people at times that seemingly have it better? Or let's flip it the other way for a moment. Maybe we lack respect for people who seemingly have less, or that we feel that we're better than. You see why we need to be free of insecurity. It can be such a dangerous trap for us. Or maybe it doesn't affect how you treat others, but it affects how you view yourself. You have a low self-worth, or you have a negative outlook on life. You know what's interesting about Saul? As I was preparing for the message, I was thinking about this. I was like, wow, the way we typically compare winning in our society, Saul had it all. Saul had it all. He had the wealth. He had the prestige. He was at the top of his game. He was a leader. Saul had it all. But it wasn't enough. Why? Because like we've been talking about in different ways over the last few months, within wins out every time. Saul had it all on the outside, but because of his insecurities, he felt like he had nothing. He felt like he had nothing. But here's the cool thing. We can learn from Saul, but it doesn't have to stay like Saul. We don't need to remain trapped by insecurity like Saul was. With the help of God, there's things that God can do, that he can help us to step by step bring freedom from our insecurity. Listen to this verse. It's just one of them. In Psalm 139, it says this: I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. You know what's so interesting about this? Typically, you'll hear like, man, God, I thank you so much for how amazing and how awesome you are. Look what the psalmist is doing here. It's almost like he's bragging about himself. I praise you for how awesome you've made me. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. See, guys, one way to free yourself from insecurity could be gratitude. You know, I mentioned a few weeks ago that according to UCLA Health, that people with a grateful mindset report higher satisfactions of life and they report a higher self-esteem. Isn't it interesting that gratitude, thankfulness, can potentially help free us from some of our insecurities? But you know, it's so fascinating, and I already kind of hinted at it as we were reading the verse. He's thanking God for how he was made. Again, it sounds like the ultimate brag. God, I'm awesome. Thank you for how you made me. Let me ask you a question. When's the last time you thanked God for how he made you? Think about that. Because usually we compare our worst to someone else's best. When's the last time you thanked God for how he made you? And again, not for guilt's sake, just for encouragement's sake. Like, start doing that. Do you ever thank God for who you are? Do you ever thank him for the life that you have? In fact, let's look at Psalm 139 again from a different translation. Again, it just seems like more bragging. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. It's like, wow, dude, don't you just want to like focus on God right now? The psalmist does in a lot of ways. But here he's just, thank you for how you made me. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. Now, some of you have heard this verse like many times, like, yeah, I know, PK, fearfully, wonderfully made, heard it before. Do you know that one of the meanings of the word wonderful is distinct? Maybe what God's trying to hint at us with that verse is, hey, you're unique. And another way you can free yourself from insecurity is valuing your uniqueness. I'm not talking about it being arrogant. I'm not talking about being a Christian jerk where you're holier than thou or better than thou. That's not what this is talking about at all. But valuing your uniqueness. Why? Because all of us are unique. But often, instead of appreciating our uniqueness, we make these unhealthy comparisons that just feed at our insecurities. Because the truth is, we all live with unique blessings and paths of life. We all do. While you may compare yourself to someone in one area, guess what? Someone's probably comparing themselves to you in another area. And maybe really the bottom line is we're all unique. We all have different strengths, different blessings, and even different struggles. And God wants to meet us where we are with who we are to offer us freedom. He's like, of course you're going to find differences. I made you unique, and I made them unique too. And here's the hint. I didn't make you distinct to make yourself feel insecure. That's not why I made you unique. That's not why I made you different. I made you different because you have a special way of looking at this world and this earth like no other. I made you different because you have a special contribution to make to this world that no other can. I made you different because you can honor me differently than the next person. Be free to be you. That's what God's shouting, lovingly shouting through these verses. Yeah, I'm fearfully, wonderfully. No, be free to be you. Some of you may even think, you know what, it's so awesome. I am in my dream job, or I feel that I'm in a very purposeful calling. Do you know that even when we're in our dream jobs or in purposeful callings, if we're not careful, it's possible to get off track because we're trying to be like someone else? But God didn't make us to be carbon copies. So we've got to fight the temptation to lose who he made us to be by trying to duplicate the ways others are living. Let's take a dream job, at least for some. An NFL quarterback, right? Wow, dream job. Like, man, they're getting contracts nowadays for like $250 million, right? Okay, I won't say any more because no more comparing, because your life is awesome too, okay? But there was a quarterback in the NFL this past year, and they kept saying in the offseason, I'm going to change, I'm going to get better. They're already one of the best quarterbacks already, and they kept saying, I'm going to change, I'm going to get better. And there's nothing wrong with changing and improving. But you could see as the season started where you're like, wow, this person is changing to the point where they're losing the uniqueness that made them special on the field. And if you were a fan of this person, you could tell, they're like, what's happened to this quarterback? Why is he doing this? He's losing his uniqueness. He's losing the special contribution that he can make on this field. Thankfully, about halfway through the season, something clicked. And again, if you were a fan of this person, you know the game where you're like, oh, he's back. And he even said after the game, I'm back, but we didn't need to know because we saw it. And I think that's how God often is with us. He's lovingly, graciously looking at us, and he's like, why are you trying to carbon copy? You're losing your uniqueness. Why are you trying to duplicate your life? That's not why I made you. I didn't make you to feel insecure so that you could change your... Again, there's nothing wrong with changing or improving, but to the point where we lose our uniqueness. That's why it's so important that we ask God to free us from insecurity. Another way to free ourselves from insecurity could be filling your mind with God's truth about you. That's right. Listen to this verse set. In Psalm 8, it says this. I want you to think about this for a moment. What is mankind that you are mindful of them? Whoa. God's mindful of us. Again, we talk about this often here. He's not just out there. He's mindful of you. What is mankind what are human beings that you care for them? God's not aloof to our situation. He cares about our situation. You have made them a little lower than the angels. And get this is so cool, because this is usually only reserved for God. When the words glory and honor come up in the Bible, it's usually reserved for God. But God cares about us so much. He's made us so unique, so special, so different that he says, wow, you even crown human beings with glory and honor. Did you hear that? He didn't crown you with mediocrity. He didn't crown you to be like someone else. He crowned you with glory and honor. Guys, maybe you can take a step towards freedom from insecurity when you fill your mind with God's truth, with verses like I just read in Psalm 8 or Psalm 139 or even other verses. Maybe Maybe it's a little less scrolling. Maybe it's a little less swiping. Maybe it's a little less outer noise. Maybe it's a little less comparing. And it's a little more of filling your mind with His truth about you. And so because of that, instead of me ending the message today, you're going to end the message. So everybody come up. You're going to share each insecurity that... No, I'm just teasing like a mass exodus, like a record time and Obi-Wan out the doors. Wow, lunch sounds good today, I guess. I'm totally teasing, but you are going to end the message today, and I'll explain what I mean. I want you to end the message by taking about 3 to 4 minutes to answer the following 4 questions. They're about to be up on the screen. Because like we've been talking about, let's not just listen and then go to lunch. Let's go deeper and talk about it with God. Being free from our insecurities. Guys, it's such a trap. It doesn't matter who you are. We all have insecurities. So here's the 4 questions. Who's a David type in your life? And if you have a husband named David, that doesn't count. But who's a David type in your life? And what do I mean by that? Someone that tempts you to compare. Where you're like, I'm just so envious of this person. I'm so jealous of this person. Again, it's not to make you feel bad. It's just to make you aware of what's going on in your heart so you can give it to God. And then number 2, what's an insecurity that typically traps you? And then number 3, choose one you want to implement into your life. We talked about 3 of them today. There's more. Maybe you want to add a 4th one. You're more than welcome to do that, or a 7th one. But choose one you want to implement in your life. I want to try to free myself from insecurity with God's help through more gratitude. I want to try to free myself from insecurity by valuing my uniqueness, because that's what God tells me. I'm distinct. That's what wonderfully really means. I'm distinct. I'm unique. I'm different. I'm special. Or maybe for some of you, you know what? I want to challenge myself to do a little less scrolling, a little less swiping, a little less outer noise, a little less comparing, and I want to fill my mind with God's truth about myself. And then the last question, how will you implement your choice this week so you can take a step towards freedom? So those questions are in your notes, or if you want to just take a picture of them, or Adam, during these 3 to 4 minutes, every minute you can switch back to, because, this between the 2 slides and stuff. But why don't you guys take 3 to 4 minutes to talk to God about these questions. Again, let's not just listen and go to lunch. Let's go deeper so God can start to take a step with you towards freedom when it comes to your insecurity. So take 3 to 4 minutes. There'll be music playing. Adam, if you want to start the music. And then in about 3 to 4 minutes, Pastor Steve's going to come out and we're going to have our last worship song.